Learn to Fight. I'm your host, Manny. UFC 303 just happened. Alex Pereira knocks out Jiri Prochazka with the head kick. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into the fights to make, the fights I want to see. And we're also going to get into the 2,500-year-old martial art, pankrtion. And we're going to break down some of their philosophies when it came to fitness, working out, and fighting, their stance, all of that. Alex Pereira is the most valuable fighter to UFC right now. I said that in a previous video. Alex Pereira is like what McGregor was back, a couple years ago, a few years ago when he was on his tear. Alex Pereira's skill is just crazy. He's ridiculously skilled, high-level kickboxer, just murking everybody, knocking them out. The way he set Jiri Prochazka up with that switch kick, what makes him so good, he has a lot of power, yeah. He has the physical attributes, but however, it's his footwork. If you look at when he knocked out Jamal Hill and when he knocked out Jiri Prochazka, also when he knocked out Sean Strickland, one thing that's universal in all these fights is his footwork. He kind of inches in, and it's very, very subtle. You're watching so many things, and he's kind of just creeping towards you, kind of like the way like a lion would or a tiger would, inching closer to where he gets in position to where he can land his shots, and you might not realize how fast and how close he is to landing his shots off the range. So he's very good at like manipulating the range and getting closer to the target with very, very precise, small movements. I love comparing the animal kingdom to the fight game and how the top, predators in the animal kingdom and fighters, that's how, I came up with the idea that the rear naked choke is the most ruthless, dangerous move in all of martial arts. Because lions and tigers, they essentially go for rear naked chokes. They go for the neck. Pretty much every predator goes for the neck in the animal kingdom when they're fighting each other. So when it comes to all of the moves in martial arts, the rear naked choke is the most ruthless, dangerous move when it comes to like a life or death thing. Alex Pereira's left hook is ridiculously powerful as well. But you might not be able to outstrike Alex Pereira, but if you're able to somehow get his back and get the choke on him, everybody's going to tap to the choke if you have it on right. So Alex Pereira's footwork, it's very, very subtle. He's never like really jumping out the way. He's never really running towards his opponent. He's super calculated by how he does everything. And he really doesn't take much damage either. He's really someone who studied the game. There's so many things that he does that are it's not just the fact that he's a super athlete and his physical attributes. Look at his footwork, the way he punches differently than people. His whole game, how he beat Jiri Prochazka, it was literally a chess match. He kept throwing the leg kick. He discombobulated him with the hook later on. Now, the beginning of the fight, Alex Pereira is creeping. He's literally inching towards Jiri. And before you know it, he's knocking Jiri out with the head kick. And Jiri, he already pre-programmed him to think that the leg kick was coming. In some footage in the pre-fight, in the post-fight press conference, Alex Pereira said he chose to throw the head kick because he saw Jiri Prochazka warming up and the way he was warming up, he was kind of like too worried about the leg kick. So he said he's going to explore the head kick in the fight. Just from that small amount of information, he was able to create a game plan and execute the opponent. It's insane. When you go to the highest level of fighting, guys are so good. It's chess. It's like lethal chess. Guys are so good that you can post a simple clip, a simple shot of you warming up before the fight, and he's able to create a game plan off that and finish you because of that. You know, so that fight was won before they ever went in the ring. What makes Alex Pereira so good is his technique combined with his physical attributes, but more so his technique. Because if you're tall like that, and you know, just being tall like that alone isn't enough. You know, there's a reason that a lot of guys can't get him to the ground. When we look at all the best fighters, like historically, a lot of the greats, right? Muhammad Ali, Jon Jones, Alex Pereira, Anderson Silva, Deontay Wilder in his prime, knocking everybody out. You know, Francis Ngannou, even guys like in the past, like Chuck Liddell. You know, Chuck Liddell in boxing, Tyson Fury. You know, all of these guys have something similar in common. And what they have in common is they're tall, long, skinny fighters. Being a tall, long, skinny fighter is the best body type for fighting. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you're shorter or because you have a different body style, you're not going to be a good fighter. It's not the case at all. But it seems to me the best body type to have to really be a dominant fighter and really just destroy guys is being tall and being skinny. Because we've seen Deontay Wilder, something about this frame allows you to generate a lot of power. Same thing to Alex Pereira. How many guys, we watch the sport, how many guys have we seen come into the game and just be able to knock so many people out? It is skill, but there's also a certain amount of like, man, this guy has a lot of raw power, you know? And when you look at Deontay Wilder and when you look at Alex Pereira, they have a similar body type, you know, super strong in their long frame. It's we look at Anderson Silva in his prime, same thing, you know, the length, being able to land shots from all over the place, being able to land kicks from all over the place, the amount of torque you're able to generate and knock people out. Jon Jones is the number one example of this. Jon Jones is skinny, long, strong, but his body type is a big reason for his success. And obviously his mind, because he's creating game plans and strategies to be able to execute the plan and beat these guys. Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira would be a crazy fight because both guys are very, very mastermind type fighters in their fields. Jiri Prochazka is a great fighter, but he doesn't necessarily have that mastermind type of feel strategy to him. You know, he's super tough and his willpower is extremely strong and he's just ridiculously tough. And he comes forward like a juggernaut. But like I said, when you fight somebody who's a very skilled fighter and understands the game, technique trumps all. You know, technique and will combined will trump all. But when we look at a guy like Alex Pereira, right? He just created a whole game plan, was able to finish Jiri by the second round quick, you know? When we look at Jones, same thing with Jones. Jones has made so many different strategies and so many different things that have changed the game in his fight career, you know? So that's the fight that I personally want to see next. I want to see Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira at heavyweight. And, you know, since Francis is in the UFC, you know, and for the longest, Dana was like, oh, you know, he's not going to co-promote. I think he will end up making the fight with Francis, but right now I want to see Jones beat Stipe Miocic, and then I want to see Jones fight Alex Pereira. The reason this is such a great fight, and this is really the fight to make, is Alex Pereira would be making history if he were able to beat Jones, and he would be the first person to ever win 3 belts in 3 weight classes. You know, 3 of some of the most, you know, most exciting, you know, weight classes: middleweight, light heavyweight, heavyweight. Historically, throughout MMA, the light heavyweight champion is usually like one of the most famous top guys in the sport. So, because you look at Chuck Liddell, look at Jon Jones, Look at Anderson Silva, 185, you know, and the heavyweight champions, Brock Lesnar. The heavyweight champion is there's a different type of energy to that. It's really the number one guy, you know. So Brock Lesnar, Cain Velasquez, you know, Junior Dos Santos, and not usually people aren't able to keep that belt for very long. So Francis Ngannou, of course. So that's the fight I want to see. I think Jones is as good as Alex is. Jones is as good as Alex is on the feet. Jones is that good on the ground. And he's that good in MMA as a whole, you know, knowing where to put people. But we've never seen Jones fight somebody who's a high-level striker like Alex. And also, Jones usually struggles with taller fighters. If the Jones that fought Dominic Reyes fights Alex Pereira, you know, and for whatever reason, Jones not able to take Alex Pereira down, that could be a very interesting fight. That could be extremely interesting. And if Alex was somehow able to win that fight, he has to go down as the GOAT. You know, that'd be the most epic career ever. And on the flip side, if Jones is able to beat Alex Pereira, it just adds to his legendary career even more so. And then, so Jones beat Alex, and then Jones fights Francis. If he beats those two, and he beats Stipe, you can't ever doubt, and no one would ever be able to touch Jon Jones's career, you know, unless someone's able to win the 3 belts. You know, so this is super, super exciting stuff, you know, just to see how good Alex Pereira has mastered striking, and his level of striking is incredible. But what I noticed the most is his footwork. It's so subtle, but without his footwork, he doesn't get into positions to land the shots to knock these people out. You know, look at literally all his fights. It's very, who else is doing Alex Pereira's footwork? I don't really feel anybody is doing his footwork. It's very subtle, but it's super effective. And he's not really taking much damage in his fights either. He's not really taking any damage in his fights, you know. On Joe Rogan's podcast, Tank Abbott said something very interesting. He talked about how fighters' fortitude is more important than anything. It's more important than techniques, more important than all of that. Now, I agree to a certain level. I do believe being super tough and fortified is probably the most important part of being a fighter. But also having because you don't have someone, you can't have someone like Jon Jones, right? Unless he's super tough. And the simple fact of that is, we look at Jon Jones when he fought Vitor Belfort, and he got his arm up in the thing. If he's not super tough, he doesn't win that fight. When he fought Alexander Gustafsson, you know, the first time, and they got into a crazy war, and he took a lot of damage. If he's not super tough, he doesn't win that fight, you know. So, but his technique is also super, super good. So when we look at Jiri Prochazka, he has technique, yeah, but it's more so just a chaotic onslaught coming at you. No defense necessarily. It's just all offense and pure will and the desire to win coming at you. And this usually drains most people. When you see, like when he fought Reyes, he just kept coming forward at Reyes, to the point where Reyes, usually most fighters are going to want like a little bit of space, a little bit of break, you know, to be able to breathe. But he just kept coming forward at Reyes to the point where he throws that elbow and he knocks him out. Same thing with Rakic. You can see how Alexander Rakic's whole demeanor changed when Jiri was still there coming at him, when he just unloaded the clip on Jiri, you know. But when you go into a high-level fighter who's super technical and also really tough, then you're done, you know. So I think the fighter's fortitude is very important, but I mean, technique is also crazy important. It's more important. I don't know. I'm still debating it. They're both super important. But still figuring out which one is more important. So Jiri Prochazka, you know, he gets clipped, he gets knocked out, whatever. He says he needs to evolve to the next level or not fight again. And that's what it's all about. That's why so many fighters, I'm saying, it's like more, you need to have a certain level in these fights. You get a certain level of mental energy, and you learn a lot of lessons from these fights. You know, it's like kind of like, it's a very psychedelic type of journey. You know, you have to find your deepest weaknesses and your fears and all this stuff and conquer them in order to become your best self as a fighter, you know, and a martial artist. So Jiri, he realizes he needs to evolve in order to be as good as someone like Alex Pereira. You know, I think Jiri has to work on his footwork, and I think Jiri has to have a little bit more technique if he wants to be able to beat someone like Alex, you know, mixing it up. You know, these things will, I believe, make him a better fighter. And these are lessons I've taken for myself as well. You know, I went back to the lab and started trying new things. You know, I've been looking into pankrtion, so now I'm getting into Greco-Roman wrestling, and we're gonna get into that because when we look at, this is how powerful the art of pankrtion is, you know, because we look at someone like Jon Jones, who is the best fighter, right? His base was Greco-Roman wrestling. Greco-Roman wrestling was his base. Pankrtion had Greco-Roman wrestling in it. You know, when you look at the statues of all the dudes with cauliflower ear, they were doing Greco-Roman wrestling. And this is a 2,500-year-old art, you know, that people have been trying to do and master for the longest. And I started studying their training regimens and their training routines and what they believed in how you should train. And it's so crazy and eye-opening how smart these guys actually were, you know, and how much there's really nothing new under the sun. So when the next fight, that if Jon Jones fights Alex and he beats him, one thing Dana White has always been saying, he's been like, no, Francis and Jon Jones aren't going to fight. Francis is scared, blah, blah, blah. He went over to PFL. We don't cross promote. We don't co-promote. He's always had a stable way he's been talking about it. It's always been the same answers. It's always been the same thing. We don't co-promote with anybody. But at the press conference of UFC 303, one of the reporters asked him about you know, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, Tariq Al-Sheikh, and because there's a video of him and Dana White, you know, they met each other, you know, they did UFC, Saudi Arabia, whatever. And, you know, so they're building a relationship. He asked him about Francis and Jon Jones, and now he had a different take. He said, these guys, or Saudi Arabia is doing great things. We'll have to wait and see what the future holds. So Tariq Al-Sheikh has been able to make crazy fights in boxing happen that have been impossible to make, such as, you know, Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, you know, fighting Josh Parker, Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou, Anthony Joshua, you know, Usyk versus Fury. These fights haven't been able to happen in boxing because there's so many titles and there's just so much going on, and there's so much politics and stuff going on in boxing that these fights just haven't been able to happen. It's been impossible to make these fights happen. And this guy's been able to make these fights happen. So why wouldn't he be able to make the Francis and Jones fight happen? Everybody wants to fight. It's the most important fight of Jon Jones's career. That fight and the Pereira fight are the most, will be like, you're in a different class than any fighter ever, you know? And he already is, but those are the two fights that are like really crazy fights that I think are like just crazy money fights. You know, they don't really care about money, so it's not a big deal to create these fights. I think we're gonna see Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou fight in 2025. Yeah, I think that's gonna happen. Jon Jones, Francis Ngannou, 2025, probably early, maybe like February. I'm just gonna put that out right now, you know, and see what happens with that. But there's just so many good fights. There's so many good fights. And when we look at Jones, and why he's such a great fighter, we look at his base. He's a tall fighter, which I believe that's the best body type for being a fighter. That's just what I believe. You know, I'm a tall, skinny guy as well, so that's what I want to believe as well. You know, GSP didn't have necessarily a body type, but he also wasn't like a very short type of guy. You know, we have guys in the past like Sean Shirk, who was, you know, short, stocky, taking everybody down. But Greco-Roman wrestling is Jon Jones's base. Jon Jones is known as the best fighter in MMA history. Pankrtion had Greco-Roman wrestling. Pankrtion was around for 2,500 years. We're in the year 2024. And what they were doing in the past is so powerful that today, the best fighter in the world, his base is Greco-Roman wrestling. I don't think people really putting these things together, you know? And so now myself, I'm about to get into some Greco-Roman wrestling. I did folk style wrestling when I was a teenager in high school, and it was incredible. It was great. You know, I still use the stuff till this day. But my school didn't have Greco-Roman wrestling. And really, I don't really know of any schools that have Greco-Roman wrestling. So I'm about to look into it myself and see what it's all about. I know a little bit about Greco. I know it's all upper body locks and you're throwing dudes down. And it's a very interesting style. It's kind of similar to judo, I believe, you know, but it's wrestling. It's a different thing, you know. So Greco, judo, these things are super ancient, but Greco, I don't really know anywhere to even be able to do Greco. I've actually never even seen a Greco match or met many people who did Greco-Roman wrestling. And it's just interesting to see that the pancration stuff is probably the most powerful martial art. And it must be because it's the most evolved martial art. You know, it was around the longest. And I've been looking into it and studying it myself. And so interesting. There's really there's nothing new under the sun. So like Jiri Prochazka said, he must evolve or quit fighting. So I've been trying to evolve, you know, myself and become a better fighter myself. And that's what's led me to look for knowledge, read books about ancient war people. You know, look at guys like Mike Tyson, you know, how he was thinking. And that's one of the reasons where there's some of the stuff that all of this stuff I'm showing you guys is stuff that I've learned throughout my fight career and my own personal experience and stuff I study every day, you know. So that brings us to how did the ancient Pancratians fighters train? Very similar to the fighters of today. How did the ancient Pancratian fighters train? Road work, plyometrics, resistance training, breathing exercises. This is how they trained. And when we look at breathing exercises, Hickson Gracie in the movie Choke, that's one of the most legendary scenes in the entire movie. When he's breathing and his stomach is bouncing around and he's doing all that stuff. That's one of the most iconic parts of the movie is him doing his breathing exercises. That's one of the things that the ancient Pancratian fighters did in training. breathing exercises, resistance training, plyometrics, road work. It's so similar to the fighters of today. You know, when we look at this picture here, 2,500 years of techniques and knowledge. Look at the guard. Look at the long guard. This fighter on the right is fighting very similar to how Jon Jones fights. He's fighting very similar to a guard, Alex Pereira, the open hand. You know, this guy on the left here, this guy on the right actually is exactly like Jon Jones. Look at where his hands are. You know, I'm very curious. I've never met Jon Jones. I've never talked to Jon Jones, but I'm very curious to see if he studied these books and this is how he created his fighting style. You know, a little bit of mix of Wing Chun and the pankrtion style, because these guys believed that they understood fighting so well that they were like, you don't just fight with one stance. You know, you're going to change your stances based on what's going on. They had multiple stances. They had multiple guards, you know, guards that are still used today, you know, regularly, you know, and we're going to get into all of this, but it's just so interesting to me. And to see even when we look at the stance here, you know, this is a very particular stance. Both people are in different stances. The guy on the right here has most of his weight on his back leg. The guy on the right here has most of his weight on the back leg, and his lead leg is light. So he could easily teep, all these different type of things. This is a very long range type of fighting guard. The guy here on the left, he looks like he's anchoring his weight kind of even in both legs. But actually, you guys can't see it from where you're at, but I can. He actually has both of his heels off of the ground, and he's fighting in a very like light type of footing type of way. You know, they understood fighting to a major degree, you know. And when we look at some of the techniques, this is the long guard. The long guard, and also this type of guard. If you see here, this type of guard, George Foreman got famous for this guard, this type of thing. Now, you see, this guard here is interesting to me. It's very interesting. I haven't really messed around with it myself, but when we look at these ancient pancration pictures, the guy on the left here, he's using a similar guard. The way he's covering his face. The guy on the right is using a long guard. You know, a long guard. All these techniques are still being used today and being understood today in current modern day fighting in MMA. It's just so interesting. These guys really understood fighting and they really knew what they were talking about. You know, and that's like eye-opening to me, you know. So we look at Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira's fighting stance here is the exact same as the guy in the last slide. You see the long guard, the hands open. You know, this is how he's warming up. We look at Jiri Prochazka's guard, completely different than any of the pictures in pancration. His guard, hands down, coming forward. This style, even though Alex Pereira is a kickboxer, Muay Thai fighter, you know, Jon Jones is a grappler, striker, full mixed martial artist. The ancient Greeks were so fundamental and they learned so much when it comes to fighting that all the stuff in pancration that they learned still permeates today in the fight game. You know, it's insane. When I was younger and I wanted to learn about fighting, to me it seemed like this information was like damn near impossible to find, but it's always been there, you know. And the further you go in the time, a lot of times they knew more than a lot of people today. You know, it's really, really eye-opening stuff. But we see here Alex Pereira using the exact same guard as the guy on the right here. Exact same guard. Now, here's multiple guards here. We got the long guard. We have different fight stances going on here. Different fight stances here. And we have another type of long guardish type of stance. We have here, same thing, long guard, long guard. The stance is here. If you look at this one right here on the left, the lower left, the way the guy's fighting, most of the weight on the back leg. The front leg is very light, and he's controlling with the hands. Same stance for the other guy. They're engaging their hands. This guy here is using a fundamental long guard Muay Thai style. Same thing with this guy here. Hands up, arms up, long guard. So when it comes to fighting, the long guard, I believe, is the best defense guard, is the best stance, in my opinion. I like that long guard type of thing. There's just so many shots that you can land in the long guard, so many shots that can be landed in the long guard. And this is a picture of that lower left picture, just to kind of get a closer look into what these guys were doing and how they were doing it. Only issue I have is they should wear shorts. I don't get why they were naked. Let's wear some shorts. You know what I'm saying? But it's just interesting to see. That's a long guard. When we go here, go back. When we go here, we see them grappling, wrestling. We see multiple fight styles. Go further. We go here. This is a great picture because this picture here shows that's exactly what Jon Jones does. That's exactly what Jon Jones does right there. The hand grabbing, the stomping the knee, and this was 2,500 years ago that these techniques were being created and done. You know what I'm saying? In fact, I'm going to pull up, Jon Jones just had a seminar out there in, I believe it was in like not the UK, it was like New Zealand or something. And he showed techniques. Striking techniques in this exact type of position here. So I'm going to find it real quick. And I'm going to show you what I mean with these guys really knew their stuff here, and someone like Jon Jones probably studied this. If I thought to study this, he probably studied it. So I'm going to see if we can find it. But when we see here, all right, here we go. So let me see if I could pull it up here. It's not working. All right, so whatever. Anyways, so this specific picture here, for people listening to the podcast, is two men kind of grabbing each other's hand. One hand is doing what's called an oblique kick or side kick to the knee. The thing is, he's doing it the exact same way as Jon Jones does it. So it's very just interesting and super cool to see that they were doing this stuff in the past. We see here they're just, I don't really even know how to explain what's going on here. I believe this is a sparring picture. I believe they're sparring here, but this is how they trained. They had cycles of 4 on the training. So the first day they would train like 75%, just kind of doing their moves, whatever. The second day they would go 100%. The third day they would rest. The fourth day is all technique. And then the cycle keeps going. It keeps going. They called it tretas or something like that. They call it tretas, their training style. Now, the interesting thing about this is this training style puts you to where you're in a constant state of training. And that's one of the things in different in my studies over the years in martial arts. That's one of the things they always say is like to be in a constant state of training. That's how you're able to perform at your very, very best, and be at the peak. So like, for example, McGregor on his way up, he was always training. But this cycle of 4 puts it to where you're just constantly training. You're not necessarily, you're resting, but your mind is always training. So the first day you're going 75%, you're doing all your moves, whatever. Second day, 100% all out, like whatever you're doing. Third day is a rest day, but you do like a light jog or just kind of recover your body, like stuff like that, technical work. The fourth day is all technical work, and then the cycle continues and continues. But what I like is how they thought about training, the idea of training in cycles, because then you're not just like, oh, I'm training, it's taking forever, I'm not evolving. In a 4-day cycle, you do a lot. 4-day cycle, you do a lot. 4-day cycle, you do a lot. So in 1 month, I mean, you have, how many cycles is that? Hold up. 1 month, you have almost 8 cycles. We'll round it up and say 8 cycles. You have 8 cycles in a month in your training cycle. I think that's a better way to look at training rather than, all right, I'm training 8 weeks, for a fight. In that 8 weeks, you have damn near 20 cycles, and you'll become a different animal. So I like the way that they looked at it. This shot here is just another look into their fight stances. Long guard. Pretty much most of these pictures, they're in a long guard. The feet. Again, this is very reminiscent of Jon Jones's, pretty much any picture you see him. So with pancration style, what they believed in was road work. Some days they run super hard, they go all out. Some days they go light, but they believed in a lot of road work. And we look at fighters like Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, these types of guys. They're always doing road work. And for myself, I can say when I was doing a lot of road work, and when I was doing road work for years and years and years, I'm talking marathons, I'm talking 10-mile runs, on a regular day, no problem. I'm talking a lot of miles, for years. And then I got injured and I couldn't really do the road work for a period of time, like maybe a year or 2 years. I couldn't do it the way I was doing it before. And I did notice just from the road work alone, if you're able to like kind of move faster, your brain's a little bit more sharper when it comes to fighting. So the road work is definitely real. It's super legit. The plyometrics. Now it's interesting because the way they did plyometrics, they would do sometimes like jumping in place, jumping on one leg, jumping on 2 legs, switching legs. They would just do very interesting hopping side to side. They would just do these, like, let's say for an hour you're jumping type deal. You know what I'm saying? So that's super, super interesting to me. One thing I forgot about the road work and the running, they would run forwards, they would do sprints, they would jog, they would run backwards, and they would run laterally, side to side. So, like, imagine running a mile sideways. Imagine running another mile sideways. Imagine running backwards a mile. So many fighters, when they move backwards, they gas out because they never really moved backwards like that for an extended period of time. So when you run backwards, you're able to, dart out the way quickly with some fast footwork, explosive footwork, because you're used to sprinting backwards. Same thing with if you're sprinting forwards, you're able to really chase that guy down and get down on him, and just kind of beat him up, and really get to him quickly. So these things are things that I knew already, but it's just interesting when I see it from the Greek perspective, and it's able to kind of make me want to train a little bit more, and learn more about training and learn more about the game. Resistance training, things like the pool, the resistance band, the resistance bands, stuff like this. you know, running around with heavy weights in a river, stuff like that. You know, I would say jiu-jitsu is a form of resistance training as well. You know, I would. So resistance training and breath exercises, breathing exercises. One thing, like when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, that saved me and made me get better quicker was I knew how to breathe. I knew how to breathe and I knew how to use my breath in a way to where I would be fresh and the other guy would be more tired than I am, you know. And to this day in fighting, it's the techniques still help me. So we all know how to breathe. We all, from the day we are born, are breathing, and you know we only stop breathing when we die. You know what I'm saying? But the most fundamental thing, the most important thing, is breathing, and there's techniques to it. And it's something that if we're in the gym and we're lifting to get our muscles stronger, we should, and we're getting our brains stronger, we should be constantly practicing our breathing and different types of breathing and how to hold your breath longer, different things. There's people who's able to hold their breath for like 30 minutes. Like no, like this is real stuff. There's people able to hold their breath for 30 minutes. So we have the capacity to be able to do these crazy things, you know. But most of us can only do probably like 1% of what our respiratory system is really capable of. So they would practice breathing. And I found it interesting because Hickson Gracie would practice breathing. You know what I'm saying? That's an iconic picture. It's an iconic thing. I got a book right here. I got a book right here called Breath by Hickson. And the cover of it is him practicing his breathing. You know? So these guys knew what they were talking about. And in fact, the whole book is kind of based off your breath. In this book, Hickson Gracie, Breathe a Life in Flow. So it's just crazy, crazy interesting to me how we evolved so much and we know so much and we kind of forget these things. And the information, especially in the fight game, is there in the libraries of Pancration because they have 2,500 years. They wrote it in stone so we would never forget, you know, to where in the year 2024, we can go back and find these stones and learn about their fighting styles and do it in the modern day and win fights. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy stuff. I love the fight game. It's so interesting. It's part of our history, you know, as humans. We've always loved fighting. You know, it was the biggest Olympic sport. We've always loved martial arts. And as a human, being able to express martial arts at the highest level, at your highest level, is just amazing. You know, one thing about Alex Pereira, he's doing so many things. He's punching differently. His footwork's on point. His combinations are unique. He's never really throwing like 4-punch combos or going crazy. He's just throwing one punch at a time, bop, bop, 2 punches at a time, you know, little counters, you know, he's checkmating you, you know, and it works. You know, it really, really works. So, and the same thing with Jon Jones. You'll never see him taking crazy combinations, doing crazy things. But I'm going to say here first, again, Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou is going to happen in 2025, February 2025. I'm just going to put it out there. If there's somewhere there's probably a bet I could take for that. And as far as the bets go for the last card, my picks were on point. You know, my picks were on point. Andre Arlovski, he lost that fight, but honestly, I feel like he won the fight because the way he fought, the way Ian Gary fought was very similar to how Andre Arlovski fought, and they gave Ian Gary to win. So I don't know. I feel like Andre won that fight. But shout out to him. The 60 fights, long career. You know, I don't want to see him continue fighting, but if he wants to, he still looked good. You know, he fought a young guy and was able to go in there and do his thing. And, you know, so Andrzejowski goes down. He's one of the best fighters of all time. And the guy who's really impacted the sport, you know, fought guys like Fedor, fought Francis. He's fought all the best fighters. He used to train with Jon Jones. So he's literally experienced and seen so much of the sport, you know. He's a hell of a fighter and a real fighter. He's a fighter's fighter, you know. And I think he should retire and go to the Hall of Fame and just kind of do his thing. But that's just me personally, just because he's a legend. You know, he looks fine. He's getting there with the Young Bucks still. He's still in there throwing down, doing his thing. So you can't hate on him for that. But so many good fights. I want to see Alex Pereira fight Jon Jones. And I want to see Jon Jones fight Francis. Those are the two biggest fights, in my opinion, in MMA right now. The two most impactful fights in MMA right now. You know, and it's interesting to me. The top fighter in MMA, his background is in Greco-Roman wrestling. Pancre is the stuff, is the real stuff. So I'm going to change my style. When they announce me, I'm going to change it to pankrtion fighter. I'm going to change my fighting style. When they announce me, I'm going to change it to pankrtion fighter. Instead of jiu-jitsu fighter, instead of this stuff, I'm going to change it to pankrtion. You know, I'm going to learn the Greco style of wrestling. That's also like, I hit a black belt in jiu-jitsu, cool. There's still a ton to learn in jiu-jitsu. But to do a whole different martial art like Greco, like Taekwondo, you know, these things, that's super interesting to me. To learn capoeira, to learn even something like fencing, you know, so interesting to me and so fun to me. And that's what martial arts is all about. So I'm going to keep looking into this pankrtion stuff. I'm going to keep dropping these pankrtion videos. And we're going to keep getting stronger and stronger. And we're going to continue to learn how to fight. Hit that like button, drop a comment, show some love.